All right. Take it away, Teresa.
Thank you. Okay, so most of you know that we do various workshops, but I have to say that probably the number one request is related to time management and productivity because we all, I'm sorry? Can you hear me?
We lost you for a second there. Yeah, you just cut in and out.
Uh-oh, okay. So this is the most common request that we receive is help with managing time. Some of you may have seen pieces of this in other workshops, but we just finished a 5-hour workshop now, putting it together because it's become such a hot topic. So it bears repeating if you have seen anything in here. All right, so first of all, it's a myth to say we have enough time. We all have the same amount of time. We have 24 hours in a day. So it really comes down to being unable to complete tasks on time. It's not about having too little time. It's also about
Teresa,
how
we
to
lost you
prioritize.
again.
Oh gosh. Okay, let me try something. I don't know why. Is that better? Can you hear me?
Teresa,
Oh, no.
we can't.
Okay, you can't hear me? I am so sorry. I don't have anything wrong at this end. Hang on. Can you hear me now? Okay, I'm going to try to call.
Hi, Teresa. Amy can hear you, so
yeah.
It's my phone. So go ahead.
Oh, how strange. Okay, so I'll keep going. So it is more about how we prioritize and what we focus on when we're managing our tasks and our projects. So I want to know what you have trouble finishing on time. And since there are so many, ignore my thing that says you're welcome to speak. Let's try posting some in the chat box. But I want to know, what do you have the most trouble finishing on a regular basis? I know you all don't finish everything on time.
Do you want me to try unmuting people?
It's probably going to be really loud. I'll give them a minute. They're thinking. This will help you think about it. Okay. So I want you to you can jot this down on a piece of scratch paper, but I want you to think about what you have trouble getting to or completing, how much time it takes, and if you enjoy the task. And what you're going to look for once you make this list is there a pattern? In other words, if you look at the things you're not getting to, you're not finishing, then is there a commonality in that those are all things you don't enjoy doing? Like for me, it's reports. I don't like writing reports. So it ends up, I'm always procrastinating, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, there you go. Expense reports, thank you, Steve. Other reports, yeah, I don't like them either. They're just boring and it's tedious and it's stressful to me because when I actually sit down to write a report, especially if it's about what I've done, I start to think, did I do anything? Like it's a crazy, of course I did a lot, but it's just not pleasant to me. Lydia's got mileage. Oh yeah, tracking your mileage, that's another good one. And so, what we do with those things is we put them off. Paperwork. Okay, no one likes evidently doing their mileage. That might be something we should look into with an app. Okay, all right, good, thank you. You can keep adding, but then I want you to actually do this when it's quiet and you have time and really keep track of the things that you tend to be late on or that you procrastinate on and see if it's related to the fact that you don't like doing it. So that's number one with how we prioritize, because instead of prioritizing the things that we need to do, we sometimes only prioritize the things we want to do. All right, so let's go to the next one. Now, I also want you to think in terms of expectations and intentions. So are you realistic about what you can accomplish in a day? And most of us are not. We put way too much on our plates, and then we're not happy at the end of the day because we didn't get done. there's a whole nother actual science around setting up your tasks to become routine. And this has to do with habits. So when something becomes a habit, we don't have to think about it and we can do it much faster. So if there are certain things you have to do every day, if you do them at the same time, the same way, or at the same time each day, it can become a habit and you'll find that you get through it a lot faster. Now, all of us have something we have to do every day we don't want to do. Mileage reports and evidently general reports. So also think about, if you don't do them in a timely manner, then maybe it's something you can do first thing in the morning and get it over with. You probably heard of that saying, like, eat the frog first. It's where you know you're going to procrastinate, so why not just get it over with so that you don't end up not getting it done. Now, do you know where your time goes? It turns out that most of us do not. We think we do, like we have a schedule and we think we're sticking to it and then we don't get everything finished. And it's because we lose time all throughout the day with other things that we'll talk about. But another exercise that is very beneficial is to track your day. So I started out with trying to guess what I did in a day, like, in a typical day, a work day and a typical day off, because frankly, I was having trouble getting my stuff done on days off too. Like, my house is a mess, the laundry's not done. I wasn't getting to the things I had to get to. So this is another thing that I highly recommend that you do. And right now, for the purposes of this presentation, think of one thing that you do on a typical work day. And then I want you to think about how much time you think it takes. And feel free to pop in comments if you have anything to say. Okay, so there's something called planning fallacy. This is a well-studied phenomenon, and it turns out whatever we estimate that we think, how long we think something's going to take, it takes longer. So we're wrong when we do our planning, and that's really critical, because if you're planning out your day or your week, it's no wonder we're not getting to everything. We underestimate. Studies, and I find this very interesting because I wouldn't think that we're optimistic, but evidently we are. Studies show that we're very optimistic about planning for how long things take. So if we try to predict how much time we need to get to work, now hopefully by now you really do know, but in general, maybe it's to get to a training. When we try to predict how much time we need, we tend to assume best case scenarios, and that's not even always on a conscious basis. So that would be like, excuse me, assuming traffic's going to be moderate, we're not going to run into accidents. And seriously, how often does that happen, right? In LA, it almost never happens. So then we end up being late. And once we're late, it's sort of a downhill spiral because everything starts running late. I'm sure you've experienced it. So we grossly underestimate how long anything will take when we try to plan in advance. And so it turns out the only way we can really determine how long it takes is to track your time. So you can use just a little sheet like I just showed you, where you write down kind of your, keep it by your desk, where you write down what you did and how long it took. And all you're really doing is gathering data at first. If you don't want to do that, you can do it on your computer. You can also use an app like Toggle. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of that. It's free. And it works on your computer and on your phone and on your other devices. And you enter, each time you do something, you're entering it into your device. And of course, I'm going to talk to you about your devices before this is over. But in this case, this could be a productive use of your device. So we're going to watch a little video. And somebody tell me if you have any trouble hearing this. Give me 1 second. I can't get out of my screen. Okay, let's try this. There we go.
So in college, I was a government major, which means I had to write a lot of papers. Now, when a normal student writes a paper, they might spread the work out a little like this. So, you get started maybe a little slowly, but you get enough done in the first week that with some heavier days later on, everything gets done and things stay civil. And I would want to do that like that. That would be the plan. I would I would have it all ready to go, but then actually the paper would come along, and then I would kind of do this. And that would happen every single paper. But then came my 90-page senior thesis, a paper you're supposed to spend a year on. I knew for a paper like that, my normal workflow was not an option. It was way too big a project. So I planned things out, and I decided it kind of had to go something like this. This is how the year would go. So I'd start off light, and I'd bump it up in the middle months. And then at the end, I would get up into high gears, just like a little staircase. How hard could it be? Just walk up the stairs. No big deal, right? But then, funniest thing happened. Those first few months, they came and went, and I couldn't quite do stuff. So we had an awesome new revised plan. And then those middle months actually went by, and I didn't really write words. And so we were here. And then 2 months turned into 1 month, which turned into 2 weeks. And one day I woke up, it was 3 days until the deadline, still not having written a word. And so I did the only thing I could. I wrote 90 pages over 72 hours, pulling not 1 but 2 all-nighters. Humans are not supposed to pull 2 all-nighters. Sprinted across campus, dove in slow motion, and got it in just at the deadline. I thought that was the end of everything. But a week later, I get a call. It's the school. And they say, "Is this Tim Urban?" And I say, "Yeah." And they say, "We need to talk about your thesis." And I say, "Okay." And they say, "It's the best one we've ever seen." That did not happen. It was a very, very bad thesis. I just wanted to enjoy that one moment when all of you thought, "This guy is amazing." No, it was very, very bad. Anyway, today I'm a writer, blogger guy. I write the blog Wait But Why. And a couple of years ago, I decided to write about procrastination. My behavior has always perplexed the non-procrastinators around me, and I wanted to explain to the non-procrastinators of the world what goes on in the heads of procrastinators and why we are the way we are. Now, I had a hypothesis that the brains of procrastinators were actually different than the brains of other people. And to test this, I found an MRI lab that actually let me scan both my brain and the brain of a proven non-procrastinator, so I could compare them, and I actually brought them here to show you today, and I want you to take a look carefully to see if you can notice a difference. And I know that if you're not a trained brain expert, it's not that obvious, but just take a look, okay? So here's the brain of a non-procrastinator. Now, here's my brain. There is a difference. Both brains have a rational decision maker in them, but the procrastinator's brain also has an instant gratification monkey. Now, what does this mean for the procrastinator? Well, it means everything's fine until this happens. So the rational decision maker will make the rational decision to do something productive, but the monkey doesn't like that plan. So he actually takes the wheel and he says, "Actually, let's read the entire Wikipedia page of the Nancy Kerrigan-Tanya Harding scandal because I just remembered that happened. Then we're going to go over to the fridge. We're going to see if there's anything new in there since 10 minutes ago. After that, we're going to go on a YouTube spiral that starts with videos of Richard Feynman talking about magnets and ends much, much later with us watching interviews with Justin Bieber's mom. All of that's going to take a while, so we're not going to really have room on the schedule for any work today. Sorry. Now, what is going on here? This gratification monkey does not seem like a guy you want behind the wheel. He lives entirely in the present moment. He has no memory of the past, no knowledge of the future, and he only cares about 2 things, easy and fun. Now, in the animal world, that works fine. If you're a dog and you spend your whole life doing nothing other than easy and fun things, you're a huge success. And to the monkey, humans are just another animal species. You have to keep well slept, well fed, and propagating into the next generation. which in tribal times might have worked okay. But if you haven't noticed, now we're not in tribal times. We're in an advanced civilization, and the monkey does not know what that is, which is why we have another guy in our brain, the rational decision maker, who gives us the ability to do things no other animal can do. We can visualize the future. We can see the big picture. We can make long-term plans. And he wants to take all of that into account, and he wants to just have us do whatever makes sense to be doing right now. Now, sometimes it makes sense to be doing things that are easy and fun, like when you're having dinner or going to bed or enjoying well-earned leisure time. That's why there's an overlap. Sometimes they agree. But other times, it makes much more sense to be doing things that are harder and less pleasant for the sake of the big picture, and that's when we have a conflict. And for the procrastinator, that conflict tends to end a certain way every time, leaving him spending a lot of time in this orange zone, an easy and fun place that's entirely out of the make sense circle. I call it the dark playground. Now, the dark playground is a place that all of you procrastinators out there know very well. It's where leisure activities happen at times when leisure activities are not supposed to be happening. The fun you have in the dark playground isn't actually fun because it's completely unearned and the air is filled with guilt, dread, anxiety, self-hatred, all those good procrastinator feelings. And the question is, in this situation, with the monkey behind the wheel, how does a procrastinator ever get himself over here to this blue zone, a less pleasant place, but where really important things happen? Well, turns out that the procrastinator has a guardian angel, someone who's always looking down on him and watching over him in his darkest moments, someone called the panic monster. Now, the panic monster is dormant most of the time, but he suddenly wakes up anytime a deadline gets too close or there's danger of public embarrassment, a career disaster, or some other scary consequence. And importantly, he's the only thing that the monkey is terrified of. Now, he became very relevant in my life pretty recently because people of TED reached out to me about 6 months ago and invited me to do a TED Talk. Now, of course, I said yes. It's always been a dream of mine to have done a TED Talk in the past. But in the middle of all this excitement, the rational decision maker seemed to have something else in his mind. He was saying, are we clear on what we just accepted? Do we get what's going to be now happening one day in the future? We need to sit down and work on this right now. And the monkey said, totally agree, but also let's just open Google Earth and let's zoom into the bottom of India, like 200 feet above the ground, and we're going to scroll up 2.5 hours till we get to the top of the country so we can get a better feel for India. So that's what we did that day. As 6 months turned into 4, and then 2, and then 1, the people of TED decided to release the speakers. And I opened up the website, and there was my face staring right back at me, and guess who woke up? So the panic monster starts losing his mind, and a few seconds later, the whole system's in mayhem. And the monkey, who remembered, he's terrified of the panic monster. Boom, he's up the tree. And finally, the rational decision maker can take the wheel and I can start working on the talk. Now, the panic monster explains all kinds of pretty insane procrastinating behavior, like how someone like me could spend 2 weeks unable to start the opening sentence of a paper and then miraculously find the unbelievable work ethic to stay up all night and write 8 pages. And this entire situation with the 3 characters, this is the procrastinator's system. It's not pretty, but in the end, it works. And this is what I decided to write about on the blog just a couple years ago. Now, when I did, I was amazed by the response. Literally thousands of emails came in from all different kinds of people from all over the world doing all different kinds of things. These are people who were nurses and bankers and painters and engineers and lots of PhD students. And they were all writing saying the same thing. I have this problem too. But what struck me was the contrast between the light tone of the posts and the heaviness of these emails. These people were writing with intense frustration about what procrastination had done to their lives, about what this monkey had done to them. And I thought about this, and I said, well, if the procrastinator system works, then what's going on? Why are all these people in such a dark place? Well, it turns out that there's two kinds of procrastination. Everything I've talked about today, the examples I've given, they all have deadlines. When there's deadlines, the effects of procrastination are contained to the short term because the panic monster gets involved. But there's a second kind of procrastination that happens in situations when there is no deadline. So if you want to have a career where you want to be a self-starter, something in the arts, something entrepreneurial, there's no deadlines on those things at first because nothing's happening at first, not until you've gone out and done the hard work to get some momentum, to get things going. There's also all kinds of important things outside of your career that don't involve any deadlines, like seeing your family or exercising and taking care of your health, working on your relationship or getting out of a relationship that isn't working. Now, if procrastinator's only mechanism of doing these hard things is the panic monster, that's a problem because in all of these non-deadline situations, the panic monster doesn't show up. He has nothing to wake up for. So the effects of procrastination, they're not contained. They just extend outward forever. And it's this long-term kind of procrastination that's much less visible and much less talked about than the funnier short-term deadline-based kind. It's usually suffered quietly and privately, and it can be the source of a huge amount of long-term unhappiness and regrets. And I thought, that's why these people are emailing, and that's why they're in such a bad place. It's not that they're cramming for some project. It's that long-term procrastination has made them feel like a spectator at times in their own lives. The frustration was not that they couldn't achieve their dreams, it's that they weren't even able to start chasing them. So I read these emails and I had a little bit of an epiphany that I don't think non-procrastinators exist. That's right. I think all of you are procrastinators. Now, you might not all be a mess, like some of us. And some of you may have a healthy relationship with deadlines. But remember, the monkey's sneakiest trick is when the deadlines aren't there. Now, I want to show you one last thing. I call this a life calendar. That's one box for every week of a 90-year life. That's not that many boxes, especially since we've already used a bunch of those. So I think we need to all take a long, hard look at that calendar. And we need to think about what we're really procrastinating on, because everyone is procrastinating on something in life. We need to stay aware of the instant gratification monkey. That's a job for all of us. And because there's not that many boxes on there, it's a job that should probably start today. Well, maybe not today, but, sometime soon. Thank you.
So did that sound familiar to anyone? I love that video because I think that is absolutely true. We're all procrastinators to some degree. It's in our nature. And of course, we always love doing something fun more than not. But think of all the things in your life that you haven't gotten to yet. And is there a good reason? Or is it that sort of more subtle form of procrastination? And we're going to talk more about procrastination in a few minutes. But I want you to start thinking about that because most of us do. All right, so now we're saying that we've got time, but we're not prioritizing right, or maybe we're not tracking, or maybe we're not planning correctly. So I want to talk to you a little bit about calendars and to-do lists, because one of the things that is happening now with technology is almost like we have too many options. So I know many people in this program who carry two phones because one is work and one is personal. And they have a calendar on their system at work or on their mobile device that they use. And they carry around a day planner that they write in. So suddenly you're having to look in 2, 3, 4, or sometimes 5 places to get all of the information that you need. So I strongly suggest that you reduce the number of programs or apps or paper, whatever you prefer, but reduce the number. You want to try to get this down so that it's more manageable. And so if you combine into one so that you don't have to remember to check multiple places, you're going to be saving time every day and maybe not miss appointments. You can also enter your tasks in your calendar as all-day events, and that will put them up at the top of the screen. Now, I'm no longer a proponent, you know, many of you know that for a long time I've said don't do a to-do list, but switch it to an accomplishment list, where you keep adding to it through the day so you can see what you've accomplished. I've done away with that now too myself. I don't keep a to-do list, any kind of list at all anymore. We'll talk about that in just a second. But if you are really, I don't know, dependent on seeing a list somewhere, then consider putting it in your calendar, and each item goes into the all day. So I'll show you what that looks like. This is my calendar, for this week. And so you can see I do several things here. One is these items at the top, these are all day items or tasks. And so for me, instead of there being a long to-do list up there, the only things I put now in a, quote, list like this, and it still goes on my calendar instead of on a list, are things that I'm dependent on somebody else, maybe to get me information, so I can't pick a time. That's what the two payrolls are. I can't do payroll until people get me timesheets, right? So there's no point in me booking a time because it varies each week. So if you do that, then what happens is you can see, and if you have, 5 things that you want to list to do that day, you can put them all up there under the all-day events. And then what happens is they will show all day, which means as you're looking at your calendar and getting in requests for something else, you can continue seeing those items you haven't finished yet. Now, another thing I do, I don't have a lot of time to block off for myself, but it is important that you block off time. So everywhere you see private, this week's really not good. There's no private down here, but private means I've blocked it off. It's my time, whether it's to think, to read, to rest, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. I have to have some time every day to just sort of get my own act together so I can get everything done. You'll also notice that I block off time for, it says emails. See all these turquoisey color, green, whatever it is? That's because I don't leave my email on all day, and we're going to talk about that too. So when you look at this, I can look at, this is a week snapshot, which sometimes is overwhelming, and then I'll just switch it to a one-day view. But it keeps me on track because I'm not only booking, so you'll see I have a workshop tomorrow, and I have one Wednesday, and I have one Thursday, and I have 2 on Friday. So there's also time in here blocked off on my calendar to prep for those workshops. That was something I wasn't doing efficiently before, and then we'd be rushed, right? So now it's blocked off on the calendar. So I just want to give you an idea that you can actually just eliminate a to-do list altogether, but if you're really, well, we're going to talk more about the to-do list because there's another problem with it too, so let's go on to that. But just keep this in mind, and this works in Outlook, I use a Google Suite, but it works in all calendars where you can get that list up at the top. So how do you schedule your clients? So anybody can pop in the answer for me because I know things have changed and everybody's more efficient, but I don't know if what's changed is how long your typical home visit lasts. So somebody let me know in the chat box about how long is each home visit, roughly. I know they vary a little bit. But are you still at an hour, hour and a half, 45 minutes? Somebody tell me. 1 hour, an hour or so. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm assuming you put that 1 hour, you block it off on your calendar. Now, do you block off just 1 hour? No, good, okay. Lydia says no. That's key because, okay, good. Good, plus you block off time for notes. That's my next question, and drive time. Okay, very good. Now, does everybody do that? You need to think about this. So you have to accurately schedule your travel time, right? On my calendar before, let me go back. See, I have travel. It's a lot of my time is travel, getting to all of these places. You have the same problem. So it's really important that you block it off so that you don't book something or overextend yourself. You also want to put in a little bit of a buffer. What happens if something goes wrong? if you have 2 or 3 visits scheduled in one day and something goes wrong at the first visit, you're going to be off the whole time, right? Good, Sahara, you put in travel time too. Excellent. And again, don't underestimate, right? Don't be overly optimistic. You want to be realistic. You can get, I mean, if you're really organized, you can easily get those 3 visits in, but you got to really be organized and block off the time you need and not accept anything additional that day so that you can make it everywhere. Now, what do you do in between visits? So you go to one and it ends at, let's say it ends in 50 minutes, and then you blocked off a half an hour for travel, and it's a miracle in LA, and it only takes you 15 minutes. Now you've got about 25 minutes. What do you do in between visits? Gas from gas, notes, calls. Thank you, Lydia. Snacks, okay. So that's really great, thank you. One of the things that you can do, so I have this all the time, and lunch, good, and Barbara, good for you for eating lunch. We all need to take those breaks and nourish ourselves. That also ties into productivity. Made phone calls to other clients, okay, thank you, Sahara. So what we want to think about is, so we're putting in buffers, and we're trying to be careful and accurate, and it can swing either way. You know, we can't control everything that happens. Oh, self-care after every visit, good. But it can go the other way too. It does happen. I've made it like early places, and then, you know, it's great finding a restroom. I have that problem too, Sonia. So I always have something in the car that I can work on so that if I get somewhere early, and then of course, because I'm in the Valley, and if I have workshops down, like say in Long Beach, it serves me better to leave ridiculously early, get there, and then settle in somewhere and do some work. So I always have something with me that needs to be done. Maybe it's not something on a tight deadline, or if I've got a tight deadline, then I carry it with me everywhere so I can work on it in between. But that's something to think about. Or back to the self-care, or the kind of trying to unwind in between. Listening to audiobooks is a great idea. Learning a language on audio is a great idea, and so is listening to some quiet, calming music. So whether it's easy listening or classical or maybe a podcast, whatever it is, but that's another great way to use that time so that you can relax and refresh before you see the next client. It'll also recharge you, and we're going to talk about breaks in a minute, so that's another form of a break, and it's about the right time. Now, do you all schedule time to complete your notes? Do you block it off on your calendar? Or do you just have it in your mind, like on a to-do list, that you'll get to it? So how many of you, yes, very good. So Sahara does. You actually need to block off the time. Sometimes, okay, Lydia, that's still good. A lot of people, I'm willing to bet, just have it on their to-do list, on our mind and at the end of the workday. Yep. So first of all, the end of the workday, we're going to talk about timing too. At the end of the workday, does that mean then, do you always finish them by the end of your work shift, or do you end up having some that spills over? Things like that. So you want to kind of keep that in mind. That's a good one that we can talk about in a minute when we talk about the time of day we do things. But regardless, block off the time. So put it on your calendar, notes, or however you want to write it. But give yourself, by now you probably know how long it takes you to write those notes. But if you don't block off the time, then that means other people can interfere with that time, and then you're going to end up behind or stressed or running late. Depends on the day. Yeah. Now, when do you file your notes? I know you upload them, I think, to the system, but do you do that every day? Do you do it once a week? What kind of a schedule do you have with that? Yep, 3 visits or less. Yep. 3 visits, I'm sure, is a heavy day. But then when you have 3 visits, how do you have time to do your notes, right? So that's when you got to plan and put it on your calendar. And then how long before you get it uploaded into the system or filed with whoever you have to file it with? At the end of the day or first thing in the morning. Okay, because I know you have a tight deadline for that. So again, that is another great thing to do perhaps during your in-between visits if you have downtime. And not to replace your lunch. Take your lunch. But I'm just saying, like, if you get somewhere early, you have 10 or 15 minutes, that's a good time to work on those so that you can file them on time. And do most of you file them on time, or do you run late? I always file my reports on time, but I got to tell you, I'm a little bit like that guy in the video with the semi-annual reports. I feel like I'm racing to the finish line. Most of the time at the end of the next day or next day. Okay, good, good. So that's very important. And it's important not only because, that's what you're supposed to do, but it's also important for you because not filing them on time or submitting them on time means it's on your mind. You're not going to relax or rest as well. You're going to be distracted by that. So if you schedule note time and you try to be consistent, day to day, then you'll find that it's easier to relax when you're off work instead of you worrying about what you're running late on. Thank you. So we're going to talk about the top time wasters. Number 1 is multitasking, so we're going to talk about that. Number 2 is social media, other apps, and devices. Third is procrastination. So that's why I wanted you to see that video first so you can kind of think in terms of both deadline-driven and other procrastination problems. And the fourth is disorganization. So monotasking, yet again. So I can't stress this enough. People just are having such a hard time with it. But it takes more time to get tasks completed if you switch between them than if you do one at a time. So instead of, sitting at work, looking at your email, then switching over, taking a phone call, then switching over, jotting some notes down, then stopping to chat with someone, then getting back to the original task at the beginning, it takes you quite a while to get the brain to refocus. So we also make a lot more errors when we switch back and forth than we do with one task at a time. For anyone on this call who has not heard me lecture everyone about this, refocusing, yes, thank you, Cecilia. We cannot actually multitask. The brain cannot multitask. It's not designed that way. So when you think you're multitasking, what you are doing is task switching, and task switching is very hard on the brain and very inefficient. So that's why we make more errors, and that's why we take longer to get something done. So if the tasks are complex, then these time and error penalties actually increase. And then each task switch, this shocked me when I found this study, might waste only 1/10 of a second, but if you do a lot of switching in a day, it can add up to a loss of 40% of your productivity. That's almost half a day. So if you consider some of your task switching isn't under your control, if you sit in an open shared area, in fact, they're now really re-looking at the whole concept of these big open, like in big corporations, there's a ton of them now. It's just these giant open areas. The chances of interruption are too great. And what's happening is productivity is really dropping. And then it's way too easy to just get in these side conversations that, of course, distract you from what you're trying to get done. So research shows that people can attend to only one cognitive task at a time. So there is an exception to this. If you're doing a physical task that you have done very often and that you're very good at, then you can do that physical task while you're doing a mental task. So if you are an adult and you have learned to walk, then you can walk and talk at the same time. But that's about the only thing I've come across that you can do efficiently. I guess if you use a treadmill, maybe you can read and walk on the treadmill, or you can watch, my gym has the little TV screens in front, so you could do that maybe, but it's really limited. I've tested this several times, and I thought for sure I could like maybe listen to a program on the radio or TV while I'm working on something, and it turns out I don't do very well. Now, we have to talk about devices because it's growing. The problem is growing exponentially, I think, every week. So devices means screens. I mean, everything's on screens now, right? But if you think about this, they're very much, many of the devices are designed to be addictive. So whether it's Facebook, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Instagram, everything is designed because they're making their money the more we watch. That's how they're making the money, by viewership and ads. So just ask yourself this question: how many of you can watch just one show on Netflix or other streaming services? I am very disciplined, and I almost can never just watch one. It's worse than like Lay's potato chips. Like I start, and because the next one starts like 7 seconds later, I am like, oh, I'll just watch one more. It's a huge time waster. Okay, I'm not saying watching TV is always bad or watching your device, but to sit and watch show after show after show instead of doing the things that you need to do puts you back in that instant gratification monkey mode. The next problem is notifications. So you cannot, I haven't seen anyone who can do this. Now, maybe you can, but how many of you, is there anybody out here that can hear your device notification and not at least glance at the phone to see what happened? And I ask that question because it doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but it is a task switch. So if you're working on something and your phone blips, beeps, sings a song, you hear it, even the hearing it distracts you, but you also tend to stop, we all do, and glance at the phone to make sure it's nothing urgent, I guess. And what we've done is we've disrupted the thought process. It takes us anywhere from a second to several seconds to get refocused back on what we were doing. If it's something complex, it can take us a lot longer. I know a lot of the things that I do require intense concentration, so whether it's if you're driving, you don't check. Good, Molly, I'm very glad to hear that. So when I'm doing, say, financial reports, or I am writing, if anything disrupts me, it can take me sometimes a half an hour to get back to where I was, because with the financials, a lot of it is, it's almost like solving a mystery, trying to dig down and find something, and if I lose my train of thought, poof, it's gone. Same thing with writing. So if I'm writing something and I have all those thoughts in my head and I get interrupted, whether it's a device or by a person or whatever it is, I've lost that train of thought, and sometimes I can never get it back. And I don't mean never, probably, months later I'll go, oh yeah, I had that great idea, but it's gone. So you really have to think about what you're doing to your brain and how you can get more done, which is to cut out all these things that slow us down. So this number is already wrong. I just read the latest number a couple of weeks ago, but we check our phones. Now, by checking, I mean you look at it, open it, and close it, sometimes not even doing anything. You just check it. It's now 159 times a day on average. 159 times. Other than breathing, I don't know anything else I do 159 times in a day. So if you open and close your phone, glance at it, maybe you don't text, but you're just scanning to see what it was, say it eats a minute each time. That's 2.5 hours a day, which also totals 38 days a year, over a month. But if you're struggling to get everything done in a day, turn off your phone, turn the notifications off, schedule your calls. There's all kinds of things you can do so that you are not picking up that little box 159 times a day. And it does, I've tested it, it makes a difference. Because see, we always overestimate things or underestimate things. We tend to think that this applies to everybody but us, and I do it too. I'm like, oh no, I'm really not on my phone that much. I don't call, and I have all my notifications turned off, but I put a little Post-it note on the case, and every time I touch the phone or look at the phone, I made a little hashtag mark. Like, I'll see just how good I am. And I wasn't that good. It ended up being like 70 times in a day. So again, that's over an hour that I lost just by picking up and putting down a phone, which is actually sort of insane. So now I don't do that. I don't pick it up. I put it away till I'm ready to use it. So at a minimum, because you have to have your phone, I know you have to have your phone for clients, but what you want to do is turn off all notifications that are not work-related when you're working. Now, I do this even more when I'm not working. I don't want to be bothered with things when I'm off, so I'll leave that up to your discretion. But you want to, and I also, by the way, took Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and Netflix, and Amazon. I don't use dating apps. I don't use games. I took all of those off my phone. So that means I have to go to my computer, click on Facebook, sign in to see if to look at things. And guess what? I never do. I did it all the time on my phone. Now I don't do it. It's like that. It gives me time to think about it. It's like, is that really what I want to do with my time? No, it's not. I have other things I need to do. So turn off all those notifications. And then another thing that you can do is you can give clients a specific ringtone or a sound. So one of the, and I did this for a long time with my clients. Now I don't, because I realized I don't really have to be on call all day, every day. But if at least you're going to get interrupted, it's going to switch tasks. But at least if it's a client tone, then go answer the phone or look at it. But if it's not, then let it sit. Don't immediately go to it. And then we'll talk about how you can schedule, just like my email time. You can schedule times of the day to return calls. You might also want to give your supervisor or your direct supervisor maybe a special ringtone. So you definitely want to answer the phone if your boss is calling. But Juan just got a text. Thank you for not looking, Juan. I appreciate that. This takes practice, though. It's very hard not to. We've been conditioned now to jump. Oh, phone's going off, phone's going off, phone's going off. You know what I mean? So it does take practice. And that's what I did is I literally, my office is at my home. So I took my phone after checking my text messages and voicemail, then took care of my business, and then I put it in a drawer in my bedroom and then put it on my calendar to check 2 hours later. Now, again, you may not be able to do that because you may have client calls that come in, but you can certainly give it that special tone so that you don't get more disrupted than you're already getting interrupted by the notification. So now we're back to procrastination, because it is one of the biggest time wasters. It's the thief of time. And it's really interesting because a lot of times we don't think we're procrastinating, okay? But this is one of the most common issues that you'll find when you're struggling to get something done, or that when you can't get things done on a regular basis. So we all do it sometimes or on some tasks. That's why I had you think about at the beginning, what are the tasks you don't finish or get to, and do you enjoy them? Because that's number one. If you don't like it, we start looking for all kinds of other things we need to do first. If you regularly procrastinate, and there are a lot of procrastinators out there, consider that typically we do this when the task is difficult or boring, and we deliberately look for distractions. It largely reflects a struggle with self-control. That's the instant gratification monkey, as well as the general inability to accurately predict how we'll feel tomorrow or the day after. There's a whole thing here with procrastination and time. So think about ways that you procrastinate. The list is endless, so I won't ask you to put it in the chat box, but whether, I know for me, I will do things like I'm working on maybe writing a new workshop, and I'm getting bored, or I can't come up with an idea, and instead of finishing, all of a sudden I'll think, oh, I need to go to the store. That's a form of procrastination. Now, I may really need to go to the store. I don't need to go to the store that minute, right? So I'm coming up with something I need to do so that I don't have to keep working on the thing I don't want to work on. So there is a correlation between pain and time related to procrastination. And the problem, again, it goes back to that self-gratification monkey, or in this case, I'm calling it your present self. You have to find a way to move future rewards and punishment into the present moment. So the little monkey is like, oh, I just want to have fun. I don't want to do this, right? So you have to really focus on how, there's going to be a reward. The biggest reward for me is usually just getting it over with, whatever it is, so I can quit worrying about it. But you've got to find a way to get that future reward or punishment if you're late or you don't get it done on time. You have to move it into the present. So in other words, you're going to make future consequences become present consequences. Excuse me. So this is exactly what happens the moment we finally move beyond procrastination and take action. As Tim Urban was discussing in that video, regardless of how long you wait, you're still going to have to do whatever it is you're going to have to do, right? So the minute you move from hesitating, coming up with excuses, whatever it is, and actually take the action of doing it, you feel relief, right? So if you have a report to write, for all of us that don't like writing reports, if you've known about it for weeks, in our case, we know about it really 6 months in advance, but we continue to put it off day after day, the stress starts to build the closer you get. Every time you see it, well, now it doesn't for me because I put it on the calendar and I actually follow my calendar, but when I used to use lists, it would just kind of sit on the list, right? So we start experiencing this little bit of nagging pain, and we start getting anxious, and not quite enough to do anything about it yet, though. It's not painful enough yet to push us over that edge. And then, of course, the day before the deadline, or in my case, like with the semi-annual reports, a day's not enough. So about a week before the deadline, then I start cramming, right, going through everything and trying to really pull it all together. Because suddenly the future consequences turn into present consequences. Then we write it, we get it done before it's due. So the pain of procrastinating finally escalated and crossed me over into the action line. So as soon as you do, the pain begins to subside. It's really interesting because in the middle, if you look at this the little bar here, it almost looks like a little bell graph. The pain in the middle is often more painful. I'm sorry, being in the middle of procrastination is often more painful than being in the middle of doing the work. And that's really true. Like once I'm in it, I'm in it. I'm going. I'm going to finish. You know what I mean? I'm not in pain anymore. So this point A on the chart, which is where we're procrastinating, is much more painful than point B, which is getting it done. So because when we're over here in this peachy color, we've got guilt, shame, and anxiety, and those are usually worse than the effort and the energy we have to put into getting the work done. So the problem is not doing the work, it's simply starting the work. Once you start, amazing things happen, right? So starting today, we're going to stop procrastinating. We have to make it as easy as possible because, you know, we're not going to do it if it's hard. It's already hard. That's why we're not doing it. Interestingly enough, one of the benefits of starting is that's where the motivation comes from. You're not motivated. I mean, that's part of why you're procrastinating. But as soon as you start to get motivated. The funny thing about the reports is every time I procrastinate, and then once I start, and I start looking at everything I've done and, you know, all the accomplishments, and then I get all jazzed. I get all motivated. Then I want to do it. It's the craziest thing, but getting started is the problem. So here are some strategies for you. You want to make the rewards of taking action more immediate. Only do something you love while doing the thing you procrastinate on. This is one tip. So it's called temptation bundling, and it's a strategy that suggests you bundle a behavior that is good for you in the long run, because we don't like the long run. So pick one that's good for you in the long run with a behavior that feels good in the short run. So maybe you procrastinate on exercising. Again, my calendar is saving me. If it's in the calendar, I find I'm making myself go. But that's always been a big one for me. So how I got myself to go to the gym is I can only listen to an audiobook if I'm exercising. So now I have a ton of audiobooks. I'm way behind. I've got years worth now at this point, I think. So now that helps motivate me to go. So instead of procrastinating, I'm like, oh, I want to hear the next chapter. I want to hear what happens. Now instead of sitting and watching, binge watching Netflix, I can only watch Netflix while doing household chores. That way I'm not procrastinating on those things I don't want to do. There's a reward built in right now which satisfies my little gratification monkey. Another thing you can do is design your future actions. Commitment devices can help you stop procrastinating by designing the future ahead of time. So it also helps you eliminate your distractions or poor habits. So think about what your go-to is. For most people, it's their phone, but whatever yours is, think about that's what you pick up when you're trying to procrastinate. Okay. So if it's your phone, that means again you're going to have to find a little hidey hole, put it in a desk drawer, put it in a briefcase or a purse or something where it's not out calling your name, because that's what it feels like, right? It's going, open me, check Instagram. So put it away so that you're not distracted by seeing it. If your issue is binge watching TV or channel surfing, you can actually do something like take the batteries out. Take the batteries out of your remote control. You don't have to throw them away, don't worry, but you have to take them out and put them right next to it. When you have that pause where you have to stick the batteries back in the remote in order to turn on the TV, that's enough pause a lot of times for you to go, do I really want to do this? Maybe I should finish that report. So it gives you that little pause that you need. Again, back on your device, remove the apps if you can't stop using it. You can put the apps on your computer, or I will tell you another trick if that seems too severe for you. Take the apps off of your home page. So go back 2 or 3 pages where you have to swipe through to find the apps, and don't put them all in one little neat folder. Make it where it's more difficult to find them and get to them. And then again, that gives you that pause so you can perhaps change. So another thing you can do, and a lot of this all of this is really changing habits, right? So you can use something called the 2-minute rule, which is when you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. Now, that does not mean you're going to finish something big in 2 minutes, but the idea is to make it as easy as possible to get started, and then trust that that momentum is going to pick up and carry you further into the task after you begin. So I've tried this with some things I just do not want to do. It's usually something financial I don't want to do. The reports are far and few between. It's the big, like, annual financial reports and things I don't like. So once you start doing something, it's easier to continue. So I've tried this where I pick it up and I say, I'm just going to work on it for 2 minutes. That's all, just 2 minutes. I'm just going to glance at it. Well, as soon as you even get your brain to look at it, it makes it easier to start taking action and makes it harder to say no to it. So that's one way to overcome procrastination and laziness. You know, we all have those lazy times where, like, I'm tired, I don't want to do this. 2 minutes. Anybody can do anything for 2 minutes. Now, the other thing that you can do is break it down. So instead of looking at a whole big project at once, which of course overwhelms us and makes us feel like we want to procrastinate, you can break it into smaller chunks. So the easiest way to do that is to shift from focusing on the number of outcomes to time. Okay, so in other words, maybe you have, like this month, or for October, I probably have like 20 workshop reports to write. If I think about writing 20 reports, I'm going to procrastinate. So instead of that, I dedicate a certain amount of time. So I'm going to dedicate, say, 15 minutes to work on reports each day. And again, this is partly a trick of the mind, partly a way to motivate yourself. But the odds are, if you spend 15 minutes working on it, you'll become more motivated to do more. But even if not, if I worked 15 minutes every day on it, it becomes manageable and the whole thing shrinks. Same thing for you. So whatever it is, if you, instead of procrastinating, let's say it's your notes, you're tired at the end of the day, someone said that they do theirs at the end. Maybe that's the way to do it. Then say, well, I'll do at least 2 minutes worth, or I'll do at least 15 minutes worth. If you don't finish, that's fine. You're 15 minutes further along. But if you do finish, then yay, right? Instead of procrastinating and making it harder the next day. Now, another consideration is whether or not you're overextending yourself. So if you've planned your time accurately, it's very easy to stop this habit. But this is about boundaries, but it's also about a really, you may have to strengthen your self-discipline. But one of the ways you can do this is, again, if you've tracked your time, we did that little exercise, example at the beginning about where your time goes. If you are asked to do something, and again, I'm not talking about your boss asking you to do something, but in general, if the PTA calls and asks if you can do something, if your significant other wants you to go with him to a company picnic, whatever it is, look at that. Where does your time go? Now, if you've got a lot of extra hours in the day, you'll notice that had a total at the bottom to see how many hours. Once you deduct sleep, how many hours a day do you have left of the 24? If you have a lot, then go ahead and commit to something if you want to. But if you don't have the hours when you look at your time, you have to start learning to say no. And we're not good at this. We do it for a lot of reasons, but we are not good at this. And it is one of the benefits of scheduling everything on your calendar, because one of the reasons I'm bad at saying no is somebody calls and says, hey, do you want to get together? And I think, well, I don't want to hurt their feelings, and I do want to see them, but I'm really busy. You go through this whole gyration of, guilt and the gratification monkey and everything's happening at once. I just look at my calendar, and if it's blocked off, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's blocked off for driving or private time or whatever it is, I just say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not available that day, which is the truth. It's blocked off. So give that some thought, because that is another place where we really trip ourselves up, and then we feel overwhelmed. So I would much rather say no now, finish my obligations, and then really enjoy the time with that person or the picnic or whatever it is, versus letting it disrupt what I have to get done on certain days. Now, if you don't have time and you really want to say yes, there's still a way to do that, which is you need to look at what you're willing to cancel. And we don't typically do that. We try to cram more in instead of canceling something to allow the time for the new thing that's coming in. Now, there's a final piece of this, which is really, it may require some reflection, but if you regularly overextend yourself, spend time thinking about your motivation. And the main thing I mean by that is, are you trying to fulfill an unmet need? So if you get your self-worth from work, which I'm not saying we all get some self-worth from work, but I'm saying if that's your sole source, for instance, of gaining or increasing your self-esteem, that's an unmet need, and so you're going to keep overextending yourself because you're trying to fill up a hole that really can't fill up. If you're lonely, you might be overextending yourself so that you've always got people around. And this is not a quick fix, and obviously not on this call, but it's not a quick fix in general. It's really a matter of just taking a look, reflecting, and considering, are there things that are really motivating you to overextend yourself that you could address a different way? More on the terms of emotions and mental needs and things like that. So just think about that, because that's a possibility too. All right, we're going to just briefly talk about organizing your workspace. If you have a messy workspace, I cannot tell you how easy that is to fix and why it's important. And it's important because study after study shows that for the majority of people, if you have a mess all around you, your thoughts are scattered. So that will save you time and help you think more clearly. Now, if you have a complex task that you have to perform repeatedly or periodically, you want to document the steps and post it where you can see it. Then you save taxing your brain and make it a routine habit. I had to do this, and I did this from the research I did for these workshops on time management and productivity. Editing the podcast requires like 14 steps in the audio software. And I was taking forever trying to switch back and forth and figure out, what to do. And I finally just posted a big numbered list. And now I don't even think about it. I just go through and follow the list. So you don't have to really deeply think about everything. If you can make it routine, make it routine. If you can make a list of the steps, make the list of the steps. By the way, even for the workshop reports, we made a form and a template, and now we have a process here so that they get cranked out much faster instead of me sitting down in front of a blank piece of paper. So think about anything you do like that you can make routine, or that you can make it a step-by-step process that you don't have to think about. Going on your home visits, don't pack every day. Load everything up into a cart or a bag, depending on what level of which visit you're doing, but put everything in it. Put everything that you could possibly need, the giveaways, your references, pens, paper, any equipment you take with you, forms, whatever it is that you normally need for a client. You should have a kit that's ready to go. And I keep mine a lot in my car, or Jessie, my program manager, keeps it in her car. So we don't have to think about taking what we're taking every day. It's already in the bag. And then all we have to do is, if there's a special circumstance, then we have to pack an additional bag. But this is the one we do most of the time. And again, block off everything on your calendar, at least while you're shifting your habits. And then if you don't get it, okay, it takes a little while to get used to, but just try it. I'm telling you, it's a lifesaver. And then again, break down tasks into time chunks. So anything 2 minutes or less on your list, this is a different 2-minute rule. If it's only going to take 2 minutes, do it immediately. So if someone sends you an email and they need to know a time or a place, or they ask you for a document and you know right where it is, get it off your desk or your computer so that everything stays nice and neat and clean. The worst thing you can do is make stacks. Don't make stacks. We can't help it all the time, but if you just throw everything into one stack, you're going to waste time every day going through the stack. So get rid of the little things, then you'd have your most challenging things first in the day, or the thing you don't want to do, but have to do. And then again, I'm going to say this one more time. Routine, routine, routine. The more tasks and activities that you can streamline and repeat, the more you'll get done. Now, self-care that boosts productivity. This is one that does not seem rational, but it actually works. And this originally got studied because when they did other studies on what made the top 10% of performers, the top performers, was that they take 15-minute breaks every hour. Now, if there's any supervisors on the phone, don't shoot me. I realize we can't do that. Most of us do not have a role where we can take 15 minutes every hour. But if you can take 5 every 90 minutes, you will find a huge boost in your productivity. The reason is it allows our brain to reset and refresh, and it gives our eyes, which is now a whole new problem we're having with all the screens, it gives our eyes a break, and it gives our body a boost. And that allows us to maintain productivity throughout the day instead of this decreasing problem we have from the morning. We're super productive, and as the day goes on, it gets worse and worse and worse. So this 90 minutes is called your ultradian rhythm, and if you follow it, it enhances performance and increases productivity over the course of a day because we don't crash. This is what it looks like. So first thing in the morning, and this is true cognitively too, we are at our best for the first 3 hours. When I say our best, I'm saying with our brain. Our brains work the best the first 3 hours after we've woken up. So what happens for a lot of us is we get to work and we start working, and then you get that 10 o'clock, oh, I need a donut or I need something, and you have it. And that might even you out for maybe an hour or two. And then by lunchtime, the rest of the day, it just starts crashing. When you take these little breaks in between, you start out, you dip a little bit, you take that little 5-minute break, it boosts you back up. So you can see instead of a decline all day, you're staying pretty steady across the day. So you're getting a whole lot more done by 5 o'clock this way than you are this way. Now, we'll talk more about self-care because, again, there have been tons of studies done that show the correlation between these two. So you want to integrate self-care throughout your day. From some of the earlier comments, it sounds like some of you are, which is excellent. These are all scientifically proven methods for improving your time management and productivity. One, of course, is to be mindful. And mindfulness includes monotasking. So right there is another reinforcement for that theory. So being mindful means you focus on one thing at a time, you do it to the best of your ability, you move to the next thing. It also means if you're mindful, you're paying attention to your body, so you recognize when you need a break or you need nourishment. Spending some time in the sun is proven to improve your productivity. So it energizes us. So if you start feeling like you're lagging, or if you've been in the car too long because that's not direct sunlight, whatever the case may be, then just take a little break, step out into the sun. Even if you stand there 30 seconds, just let the sun hit your skin. Of course, getting exercise, which is one of those things that many of us have trouble with, we procrastinate, but you want to really consider that the more you exercise, the more energy you have. And of course, that increases productivity. Then you want to eat healthy. And I am not asking you to give up whatever pleasures you have in life, but we can all do better than we're doing. There's a few out there. I want to give you credit. I know you eat healthy all the time, but many of us do not. And I know many of us that are in the car all the time do not, because, we feel like, oh, we're starving. There's only 15 minutes before the next client. Grab fast food. I totally get that. I have the same problem on some days. So what I would suggest is that we think about what can we do to eat healthier. And one may be make your breakfast the healthiest meal of the day. Like eat something really healthy for breakfast, start your day off right, and then if you end up slipping for lunch or for snacks or whatever happens, then at least you got that one healthier meal in. The second is you can set an intention each day to eat. If you're currently eating one healthy meal, you could set an intention to eat an additional healthy thing. So maybe if you have to go to McDonald's at lunchtime, then with your McDonald's, then you also eat an apple or a salad or something like that. So you can just set that intention to keep boosting up the amount of healthy food you get. Obesity is at an all-time high. It makes us lethargic. It's bad for our blood sugars. It's bad for our hearts. There's just so many negatives about not getting enough exercise and not eating healthy. So anything you can do that helps, that's a good thing. Now, be happy. Now, before you say, well, I can't be happy if, you can decide to be happy. You can get up in the morning and you can decide, I'm going to be happy today, and focus on what makes you happy. And when I say that, I don't mean the instant gratification monkey. I mean more be cognizant, be aware. What did you just see that made you happy? Is it sunny outside? Is the sky beautiful blue instead of smoky? Is it plants that you pass? Is it a conversation with someone? if you focus on being happy, interestingly enough, you do get happier. But secondly, Harvard and Yale have done a lot of studies now for about the past 10 years that have shown a very strong correlation between feeling happy and being productive. So again, that's a fun way to be productive, right? Get happy. And then give yourself rewards. We work hard, right? So there's nothing wrong with giving yourself a reward. So maybe it's doing something fun on the weekend. Maybe it's taking a little break, a little longer break in between clients, like give yourself 5 minutes after you arrive to just spend some time meditating or breathing or listening to something that you want to listen to on the car radio, whatever it is. But try to work in. It doesn't have to be big rewards, but just little rewards that reinforce all of this good behavior. So now let's look back at the list of what you have trouble getting done on time. I want you to think about whatever you jotted down. What can you change now about how you approach those tasks? And if anybody, while we're talking about this, I would love for anyone who has tips on how to save time or increase productivity to pop it in the chat box. Okay, so there are several things that we can do about how we approach the tasks based on what we just talked about. So one is not overextending ourselves, putting it in our calendars, everything that we're doing, block off the time, plan well. Oh, Barbara has a tip, combining something pleasurable with a task I dislike. Yes, that has saved me because then I don't feel deprived, Barbara. I really want to watch like a whole series of, maybe on Netflix, and I feel guilty if I'm just sitting there watching TV when I have so much to do. So by dusting and loading the dishwasher and all that stuff while it's on, then I get to enjoy that show and I get to feel good about finishing something. So thank you. That's an excellent one. So anyway, you want to look at what you're prioritizing. Are you working on what needs to be done, or are you procrastinating and doing other things and then getting yourself overwhelmed? I hope that there's been enough tips in here that helps. And I want to see, hang on. I do want to share this with you. And I can send this to Malika. Oh, I've already sent it to Malika. She can send this out to anybody who gets. But these are a lot of quick reads. I mean, they're just articles online that really you might find some more tips that I didn't use in this presentation. I'm going to take a drink of water. Hang on. So you don't have to hear me cough. But several of these are really good, including, you can also look at the ultradian rhythms and get more information about that. I did want to say or share on the ultradian rhythms, I said 90 minutes, and for some people, for some reason, it's closer to 2 hours. So you might have to experiment. Yes, Cecilia, we can send out the handouts. And then now I'd like to open it up for any questions, comments. We actually finished a little bit early, so if you're struggling with time management, you can also email me and tell me kind of what the issue is, and I'll be happy to give you some suggestions. And then we do have the workshops now. So we have so if your whole team is struggling, then that might be a good question to ask your supervisor, is if you might be able to use a workshop on that. We have them now in different time slots. So we have a 2-hour workshop, a 3-hour workshop, and a 5-hour workshop. So that's another consideration.
Any questions for Teresa? We will send the slides out to answer Cecilia's question.
I hope you'll all spend some time really paying attention to where your time goes now. Maybe the rest of today or all day tomorrow, and just get a feel for it, because you'll be surprised.
Nope. Okay.
Oh, we have a suggestion from Christina. Things that I find to be helpful, aside from the things you shared, are making lists and prioritizing. And thank you for all the information. Thank you. Thank all of you for participating today. And I hope that you'll really think about it, because when I started doing all of these things, once I started practicing it, I was shocked. I really did save 2 to 3 hours a day just by making shifts from getting rid of to-do lists and working on calendars instead, and turning off those notifications and social media. So.
All right, everyone, thank you. We will send out the slides and a webinar link so that you can share this information with your coworkers as you see fit. And yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay, everyone, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.